cruise or expeditions. In fact, I've been doing it for quite some years. I'm here as much as most people to learn more about Aurora Expeditions today, but I did want to start by saying my humble apologies on behalf of all of the team at Aurora. The gremlins seem to have crept in somewhat with our presentation yesterday, but I'm very, very pleased to say that we're all back on a level playing field today. I do hope you enjoy what we have to show you today, and I hope you'll really love to hear from the wonderful Anna Powell, who's going to she's going to get the ball rolling with our presentation today. As I say, I'm the new guy here in town. I'm the Director of Sales for Asia Pacific, and I'm really looking forward to meeting a lot of you along through this long journey of ours. Thank you very much. Anna?
Thanks, Steve, and hello everybody. Wishing you a very warm welcome to Aurora Expeditions this morning, afternoon or evening, depending on whereabouts you are in the world. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'm going to, sorry. Martha, could you help me out with that? My name is Anna Powell and I'm a Business Development Manager for Aurora Expeditions. I'm based in Queensland, Australia. And joining me today is the wonderful Mark Lee, who is our product manager and destination guru. Mark is based in Melbourne, and we also have the lovely Martha from our marketing team in the Sydney head office, who will be moderating the session, and you'll hear her gorgeous Irish accent during our question time at the end of the presentation. Say hi, guys.
Hi, everyone.
So it's really wonderful to be joined by so many of you today. We're going to turn off our cameras now, just to ensure things that do run as smoothly as possible. Please bear with us if there are any delays during the presentation, as we're streaming to you live from across the world, which is very exciting, but sometimes does cause challenges. Please also remember to at the end of the session, we will have a question and answer session. So please send us your questions as we go. You can do that really simply by just clicking into the box on the top right-hand corner of your phone or computer and sending us a message. We will do our best to answer all of your questions in today's sessions, but if time is getting tight, please do remember, we'll get back to you directly afterwards. So I thought we'd begin our journey today by having a brief refresher of our pioneering legacy for you. Our founder, Greg Mortimer, is a world-renowned mountaineer and a legendary Australian explorer. He was the first Australian to have summited Mount Everest and K2 without supplementary oxygen back in the 1980s, and he has personally led over 80 expeditions to the polar regions. Greg and his wife Margaret were so deeply inspired by the wildly remote places that they had experienced, and they wanted to share this with the world. So as a result, going back some 29 years ago, they set up Aurora Expeditions with the pioneering ethos of wanting to take small groups to the most pristine, untouched destinations on our planet, but doing it in a way that was very responsible and respectful to the environment. Over the decades, we have continued to pioneer numerous firsts in the expedition world, and our most recent first was back in November last year when we launched our new ship, the Greg Mortimer, named of course in honour of our founder. This is the first vessel ever of its kind in the industry, and it was purpose designed by our expedition team. The bow of the ship, in the middle of the screen there, looks a little bit different to any other vessel. It's a bit like the beak of a toucan or the nose of an aircraft. This is known as an X-bow. This streamlined design means that rather than riding up and down the swells like you would on a traditional ship in choppy seas, we just carve gracefully through the water like a hot knife through butter. And this means a much more comfortable ride for our guests, much faster sailing times as we transition through open sea passages, and it's also helped to reduce emissions by some 80% as well. We're so proud to have pioneered this futuristic design. The ship is a beautiful vessel, and you'll see some pictures of her later on. But as I'm sure many of you know, at Aurora, we're all about getting off the ship as much as possible. We launch our Zodiacs multiple times a day for excursions in small groups, led by our world-class expedition guides. You can see on screen now some of the many activities available on our voyages. Please keep in mind though that not all activities are offered on every voyage, and fees do apply to certain activities. So ultimately, we treat our ship like a very relaxed and comfortable base camp for exploration, and we're all one big family aboard, which is true to our Australian spirit and legacy. So that's just a very brief overview on us. I'm now going to hand you over to Mark, who's going to talk through our incredible new Arctic and Global 2022 program. So Mark, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Anna. And hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today from wherever you're listening to this webinar. I'm really thrilled to be speaking to you about our new itineraries, which have been more than a year in the making. So I'm speaking to you here in Melbourne, where we were in lockdown for over 100 days, during the worst of the pandemic here in Melbourne. But in some ways, I try to kind of, take some positives from that, because I was able to really, kind of put together these programs and work in researching and speaking to experts all around the world and putting this together. So in many ways, I feel like, I've been a bit of an armchair traveler visiting some of these fantastic destinations. So I thought I'll just start off by talking about some of the inclusions in our voyages in the 2022 Global and Arctic program. So just go through each of these individually. So all the voyages will include one night pre-voyage accommodation in at least a 3- or 4-star hotel, where we'll have a welcome reception and briefing and potential medical testing if required as well. All the transfers are included now. So as soon as you land in the joining point, then your transfers to the hotel will be included. We've also decided to include all the tips and gratuities for the crew, just to kind of make, take the pain out of having to deal with that later on. All the pre-voyage sightseeing, if time allows, will be included as well. Sometimes on the day of embarkation, there's after checkout, there is some time before embarkation in the afternoon. So it gives us an opportunity to do a bit of sightseeing in the city. So we'll include that wherever time permits. And some of these destinations, of course, are to very remote places, and so access is quite difficult. And in those instances where charter flights can be quite complicated and difficult, we've included charter flights to get you there, whether that's at the beginning, at the end, or both in some instances. And also free access to our onboard medical clinic and for the initial appointment as well. So some nice inclusion there to make everyone's life a bit easier. Move on to the next slide. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. All right, so I'll start off with the first of our 12 new itineraries. Before we've put together the new programs, we certainly spoke to our past travelers and our trade partners as well, just to kind of get an idea of where people were wanting Aurora expeditions to operate. And the 3 top destinations that came out of the surveys and feedback with people were the Northwest Passage and the Russian Far East, and also Alaska. So I'm really excited to be talking about our new Northwest Passages to start off with, before talking about the other ones, including the Russian Far East. So the Northwest Passage is, of course, a sea route across the top of Canada, connecting the North Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. It's only been in the last 10 years or so that passenger vessels have been able to complete a full crossing of the Northwest Passage. So since the late 15th century, explorers have been trying to find their way through. So the most famous of the expeditions was led by Sir John Franklin in 1845, which tragically did lead to the death of everyone on board, including Franklin. And the graves of a few of the sailors from the expedition can be found on Beachy Island, which we'll be visiting. And just a nice bit of trivia for you here. It was Amundsen, the explorer, who became the first explorer to successfully navigate the passage in 1906. So we've got 2 Northwest Passage voyages in 2022. They're both 17 days. The first one starts on the 24th of August and then finishes on the 9th of September. And the one after that starts on the 7th of September, finishing on the 23rd. It's aboard the Greg Mortimer. It includes charter flights on either end. So this one starts in Toronto, charter flight to Kangaluswak in West Greenland, where we embark, and then we sail west, disembarking in Cambridge Bay and finishing Calgary with a charter flight from Cambridge Bay to Calgary. Some of the highlights of the Northwest Passage expeditions. The first voyage starts in West Greenland in Kangerlussuaq, and so we visit the wonderful Ilulissat Ice Fjord, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Outside of Antarctica, the Greenland ice sheet is the largest in the world. So some of the kind of incredible icebergs, the tabular icebergs, and really spectacular geometric shapes of the icebergs can be seen in Ilulissat. So it's a wonderful way to start the Northwest Passage on the first voyage, and a nice way to end on the second voyage. We do a great hike on Devon Island, which is the world's largest uninhabited island. It features really stunning geology, fjords and glacial valleys. Some scientists have kind of equated the landscape of Devon Island to that of Mars. It's a very dry polar desert, so it certainly has a really fascinating landscape to explore. As I mentioned earlier, we visit Beachy Island, which is the historic site, where we get to see some of the graves and memorials of heroic explorers from John Franklin's expedition. So it's a nice way to pay tribute and learn a bit more about the history of this particular route and this area. And of course, the fantastic wildlife, the Arctic wildlife that we hope to see, so including musk ox in Greenland, certainly the polar bears in a number of areas throughout the itinerary, beluga whales. We certainly do see beluga whales on some of our other Arctic voyages, such as in Svalbard, but the volume of beluga whales that we hope to see in the Northwest Passage is almost unrivaled. So if we're lucky, we get to see this spectacular sight of the beluga whales. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the following slides. The walrus, of course, and the very elusive narwhal. So I think if we're going to see narwhal anywhere in the world, it's going to be on this particular itinerary. They are very shy, but I think if there's anywhere, then it's going to be here that we're going to be able to see the wonderful narwhal. And like Anna said, Aurora, we offer a lot of activities, and it's all about getting off the vessel and exploring the destination, but it's also great for activities as well. And on the Northwest Passage voyages, we will be offering sea kayaking as an optional activity. Now, it's just some images for you here, just to give you an idea of the wonderful sights and experience that we hope to see there. So this is Prince Leopold Island, bird sanctuary. So you can see the zodiac there, just to give you some scale of this incredible, bird cliffs. The sanctuary is on Prince Leopold Island. It's a migratory bird sanctuary for numerous species, including the nesting thick-billed mewers, northern fulmars, black-legged kittiwakes, and black guillemots, just to name a few of the birds that we hope to see there. Just waiting for the next slide. Sorry about the lag. So maybe you can help me go through the next slide. Okay, sorry about that. So I was just talking about the beluga whales before. So this is in Cunningham Inlet. It has a shallow sandbank around Cunningham Inlet, and at the right time of year, which is when we'll be operating our voyage there, we get to see this incredible behaviour called molting, where the beluga whales are shedding the outer layer of their skin. And they rub themselves against each other and also against the sandbanks there, the shallow sandbanks. So if we're very lucky, we get to see this incredible sight, this natural behaviour as well. Just a picture of the wonderful Ilulissat Ice Fjord in West Greenland. So some wonderful kind of large tabular icebergs and some wonderful shapes there. And then moving on to our Kamchatka and Chukotka voyages, so two of our Russian Far East voyages. It's not the first time that Aurora has operated to the Russian Far East. We last went to this region back in 2011, back in the olden days when we were using some Russian ice-strengthened vessels, but these days we've got our own purpose-built expedition ship, so it's really nice to be able to go back to this region with our own vessels, but with all the experience that we've gained over the years of operating there. So we have two Kamchatka and Chukotka voyages, both 17 days as well. The first one starts on the 6th of July, finishing on the 21st, and the second one from the 14th of August through to the 31st. So the first one there is actually a and northbound, starting in Petropavlovsk Kamchatsky. And I'll only say that once because it's a bit of a mouthful. So from now on, I'll just say PK. And I hope you remember what I'm talking about when I say that. So it's PK up to Anchorage, so up to disembarking in Nome with the charter flight to Anchorage. And then in the reverse direction, we're starting in Anchorage with a charter flight to Nome, and then we head across the Bering Sea and then heading south, finishing in PK before a charter flight takes us to Tokyo. So some of the highlights on this voyage, we get to encounter some of Kamchatka's abundant brown bears and their cubs. We're there at the peak time, like in the summertime, to see wildlife at its best, and also the tundra in wildflower blooming there. So the window to visit Kamchatka is very small. So pretty much had to kind of all schedule not just the Northwest Passage, which also has a very small window to operate in, but also in Kamchatka as well. So we're timing our visits there to make the most of the natural conditions. Along the way, we'll meet some of the Koryak reindeer herders in Timlat village, some of the nomadic Chukchi reindeer herders a bit further up north, and they welcome us with their song and dance and tell us stories about their life. And the children in the villages really are enthusiastic in meeting you and other travelers and practice their English there. On all of our voyages, you know, we endeavor to kind of offer 2 landings a day. The first one's usually a Zodiac cruise, or it's a hike. So whether it's a hike through wonderful tundra or stone birch forest, or Zodiac cruising along the rivers and the bays there to see the wonderful volcanic scenery along the Kamchatka coastline, and some of the fantastic wildlife as well, including the birds such as Steller sea eagles, some of the fantastic, the bird cliffs there are really alive with thousands of various bird species, including puffins and guillemots, auklets and kittiwakes. And in the waters there, of course, the abundant sea lions and marine mammals such as orca and humpbacks as well, and of course the wonderful sea otters. And on both of the Kamchatka and Chukotka voyages, we're offering sea kayaking, snorkeling, and scuba diving as well. So Scuba Pete, our dive master, who's been to this region many times, is excited to be including scuba diving on the second of our Kamchatka and Chukotka voyages. Next slide. So pictures here. So of course there's along the Kamchatka coastline, it's of course a volcanic area, so, and a very misty area as well. So often the weather can be quite misty, and but when it parts, it reveals this wonderful kind of volcanic scenery, and this is quite an iconic shot of, you know, the brown bears hunting for salmon along the coastline with that gorgeous volcanic scenery in the background. Next slide. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Oops. We also visit the Commander Islands as well. So the Commander Islands have been kind of compared to South Georgia of the Russian Far East. It's an island just off the coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula, and it's got fantastic bird life there, including the tufted puffins. And it's also the resting place of the exploring Bering as well. So we visit Bering's grave there, and there's some wonderful marine life that I talked about before, but it's also fantastic for the bird life. And just a picture of the Koryak reindeer herders in Timlat village, working us with their song and dance, and you can just see some of these fantastic traditional clothing that make out of fur and pelt of the local animals that you know, they hunt in the region. So this itinerary is really wonderful because it's a nice mix of culture as well as wildlife and the fantastic scenery as well. We're very excited to be going back to Wrangel Island. So 2 more itineraries in the Russian Far East. Wrangel Island, of course, is located well above the Arctic Circle at about 73 degrees above the Arctic Circle. It escaped glaciation during the Ice Age, so resulting in a really exceptionally high level of biodiversity. The woolly mammoths were found here only 40,000 years ago. And the island boasts the world's largest population, not just of the polar bears, but also of Pacific walrus, the largest breeding grounds in the world. And it's also a major feeding ground for grey whales migrating north from Baja, Mexico, Baja, California in Mexico. And it's the northernmost nesting ground for about 100 different migratory bird species, many of which are endangered. So some of the highlights there, of course, seeing the polar bears and the Pacific walrus. We experienced some of the performances depicting traditional life of the Yupik and Chicxulub people up in the further north on the Koryak coast up there. And of course, the two activities that we try to do each day: the zodiac cruising to experience the grey whales, humpback whales, belugas up there, the large Pacific walrus communities, and thousands of different seabirds, especially around Aleutian Bay and Aleutian Inlet. Some fantastic bird watching, the cliffs there, and great hiking as well to once again to see various migrating birds, including some of the world's largest populations of emperor geese and spoon-billed sandpipers and yellow-billed loons. So wonderful for anyone who's really interested in bird watching. Next slide. Of course, no need to explain what this is here, but so certainly we hope to see as many polar bears as possible on the tundra. On Wrangel Island, we do a circumnavigation of island in a clockwise direction. We've got 4 or 5 days up in Wrangel Island, so there's plenty of time to really make the most of our wildlife watching opportunities there. Next slide. Zodiac cruising, getting up close to the Pacific walrus. And a better shot here of the large population that of these wonderful creatures. And the last of our Russian Far East voyages are the Kuril Islands. As we make our way southwards, it's a 15-day itinerary, including the charter flights between Tokyo to PK. So it's just a southbound voyage. So we embark in PK, or Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, and then we head down, disembarking in Otaro in Japan before we transfer you to Sapporo Airport. So it's a wonderful a bunch of islands, volcanic islands connecting the Kamchatka Peninsula with Japan. It's very similar to the weather up in the Kamchatka coast. There's a bit of a joke amongst the Russians that they wait 11 months for summer to arrive, and then when summer does arrive, they're disappointed for the 1 month when summer is there because of the misty conditions. But I think speaking to Howard Whalen, one of our expedition leaders who's been to this area many times, he said that when the sun does come out and the mist does part, is absolutely stunning scenery with those volcanoes that I was talking about before, slowly revealing the volcanic scenery when the mist does depart. Wonderful for bird watching as well. So some really nice terminology here from Howard. There's a supercharged bird watching along a migratory flyway alive with Siberian ruby throats, rough-legged buzzards, snow buntings, spectacled pigeons, and tufted puffins, and rhinoceros auklets. So there's a few endemic species of birds to be found along this itinerary as well. So again, a great voyage for anyone who's really keen on bird watching. And again, zodiac cruising is great here because there's of all the different marine mammals, including the Steller sea lions, named after George Wilhelm Steller, the naturalist who was aboard the Russian expedition that founded Alaska in the 18th century. So great for wildlife watching as well. And really interesting, there's great some Soviet history. So in Brutana Bay, there's an abandoned secret submarine from Soviet times, and also a gulag as well, so a former Soviet prison. that housed female prisoners during the Soviet era. And there's a wonderful island that's a flooded caldera. So during a high tide, we're actually able to Zodiac cruise into the flooded caldera. Pretty spectacular scenery. We do a nice hike up the ridge there, offering fantastic scenery of the crater below. So of course, it's the chain of volcanic islands that separates the Kamchatka Peninsula with Japan. So certainly hope to see some brilliant volcanic scenery along the way, including this one, the Krenitsin volcano. And more wonderful kind of geology here. So the basalt columns, great just to get up close and see, you know, and learn about the geology here. So of course, we're going to have some volcanologists and geologists on board to really, you know, bring the destination to life and you know, impart their expertise about the geology. So this is on Kuril Island. Of course, we start to see the brown bears as well throughout this itinerary. So those are the new Russian Far East itineraries that we'll be introducing in 2022. And the third of the top 3 destinations that round out the top 3 were the Alaska, including the Aleutian Islands. And again, we have operated to Alaska before, but it was the first time for using our own vessels. So 3 new itineraries in Alaska. The first one is the Alaska Adventure. It's a northbound itinerary starting in Vancouver and then finishes in Sitka. And the second one, I'll talk about these a bit more in detail as we go along through the slides, but just a snapshot for you here. And the second itinerary is Alaska Adventure and Haida Gwaii. So it's in the reverse direction, so starting in Sitka and then heading south. But then the difference between this one is that we focus more on the First Nations community. So we've spent 3 days in Haida Gwaii, and before heading across to the Bella Coola region, where we have an exclusive Zodiac, you know, the polar bear, that's not polar bear, I'm sorry, the brown bears shore excursion there that we have with a local operator led by First Nations people as well. So really excited to be bringing you that excursion before finishing in Vancouver. And then finally, the third of our itineraries against northbound. It's very similar to the first Alaska Adventure, but it's a day longer. And we're going to be focusing a bit more on the glaciers, some of the famous glaciers in Alaska. So all 3 itineraries will have you know, visits to the glaciers, but we're going to be spending a bit more time up in Prince William Sound and College Fjord, where there are some fantastic glaciers up there. So the coastal brown bears, of course, will be a real highlight on all 3 of the itineraries. Next slide. Oops. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of these images here are the experiences that are common on all 3 of the itineraries. So all 3 will visit the Misty Fjords National Monument. So some of that iconic scenery that you'd expect to see on an Alaska voyage. So those soaring granite mountains that are snow-capped, the hemlock and spruce forest reflected in the calm bays there. So certainly what you'd expect to see on any trips to Alaska. We visit Elfin Cove as well along the Icy Strait. I'll put these itineraries together with an expert, one of our kayaking guides that lives up in Juneau, who knows the area exceptionally well, and she describes this area as being fantastic because of the wonderful whale watching opportunities up there. So when we're there in May and June, we certainly get to hope to see the grey whales on some of the voyages, and certainly the humpbacks as well. So paddling around Elfin Cove, Adolphus Point and Icy Strait, there's some wonderful whale watching as well as sea otters as well that we hope to see here. And hiking along some of the shorelines or Zodiac cruising, seeing some of the coastal brown bears along the shoreline. So wonderful wildlife on the Alaska itineraries. So here, just a bit of a summary of some of the wildlife. So you've got the bubble net feeding behavior of the whales on the top left. You've got the sea otters in the middle top there, and the Steller sea lions top right. The bald eagle bottom left, the brown bears, of course, and the orcas pack hunting bottom right there. So wonderful wildlife watching opportunities. So on the first Alaska itinerary, it's the northbound starting in Vancouver. Some of the highlights of this one, on all three of our itineraries, we do visit the Metlakatla Indian community on Annette Island. So where we're guided by the First Nations community there, we'll get to 3 different shore excursions that you can choose from. They're all involving some hikes, learn about the totem, the hand-carved totem poles, and they do a traditional performance for us, and we get to meet them and learn about their culture. Of course, the wonderful wildlife that I talked about, including the bears, eagles, and Tongass National Forest. On this particular itinerary, we do visit Haines. Haines is said to be a adventure capital in Alaska, and we're offering a number of shore excursions here as well. So another thing about Aurora is that we do include all the shore excursions in the voyage price. So there's no, you don't have to pay anything extra for the shore excursions, which gives you a bit of peace of mind. So a number of shore excursions, including some great hikes, visiting the Valley of the Eagles to see some of the bald eagles there, and also opportunities to see some of the coastal brown bears as well. And of course, the Zodiac cruising, kayaking, hiking along the shorelines to see some of the wildlife. So the activities offered on this particular itinerary, sea kayaking, stand-up paddle boarding, snorkeling, and scuba diving as well. So I didn't realize that we could do scuba diving on this itinerary, but our expert Scuba Pete says there are a number of spots that are just wonderful for scuba diving. So we're very excited to be including that activity on these itineraries. So we visit Thomas Bay on this particular itinerary as well. So some nice hikes through the spruce and hemlock forest to a glacier called Baird Glacier. So that's a nice point of difference on that particular itinerary. So the second one is the Alaska Adventure in Haida Gwaii that I talked about before. So very similar in terms of some of the places, including Elfin Cove and Icy Strait. This particular itinerary goes to Juneau, whereas the Alaska Adventure doesn't. So just trying to create some points of difference between the itineraries, just depending on what your main interests are. So some of the highlights on this particular one, we're guided by local New Shore guides in the Dean River, which is the Bella Coola region that I was telling you about, where the grizzly bears are known to gather in really large numbers. So we're going to have the local First Nations guides in each of our zodiacs kind of talking about their life and showing us the wonderful grizzly bears in the channels there. We spent 3 days in Haida Gwaii, where the local Haida residents share their stories as well. So we were able to walk through their communities and do some wonderful hikes and walks, hear stories about their life and culture, and of course look for the wonderful wildlife throughout the region there. Explore the islands around Icy Strait that I talked about before. So I won't go through those again. And of course, the activities are similar to the first one. So sea kayaking, SUP, stand-up paddle boarding, and scuba diving and kayaking. So the pictures of the hand-carved totem poles in Haida Gwaii. I think all the totems are quite unique, depending on the First Nations. So it's really interesting to hear the stories about, the significance behind their totem stories. And then finally to the Aleutian Islands, which is part of the US territory. So the Aleutian Islands, this particular itinerary is 16 days. It's starting in Anchorage, where we drive you to Seward to embark before, pretty much island hopping all the way along this volcanic chain that links the Ring of Fire from, the Alaska coast all the way across to PK. So some of the highlights on this one, we get to explore some of the deep fjords along the Alaskan Peninsula, lots of glaciers and Bergie beets and brown bears foraging along the shoreline there. So the Aleutian Islands are like a chain of active volcanoes along the Pacific Rim of Fire. There's roughly 15 large volcanic islands and 22 smaller ones as well. So, and also some really interesting World War II history. So in Kiska and Attu, it was the only place that the Japanese and the Americans fought on American soil back in World War II. So there are some interesting relics to be found back there. So not only do we see some of the wonderful wildlife on Zodiac cruising, see some of the interesting geology there, but also really fabulous World War II history. And then we disembark in PK before a charter flight takes us to Tokyo to end the voyage there. So the Alaska Odyssey, the third of our classic Alaska itineraries. So it's a northbound itinerary starting in Vancouver, very similar to the first Alaska adventure, but the main difference being we spend more time appreciating the wonderful glaciers there. So we're 2 days exploring Prince William Sound with its countless fjords and tidewater glaciers and wildlife. So other glaciers that we visit include the Twin Sawyer glaciers in Misty Fjords there. And also the Hubbard Glacier in Mendenhall. Again, we visit the Metlakatla Indian community on Aleutian Island. And again, so some of the wonderful activities we were offering, zodiac cruising and hiking, etc. So, and the same optional activities as well, including sea hiking and stand-up paddleboarding and scuba diving. So very similar to the first one, but just all the highlights, including more focus on glaciers. So just a picture, sorry to go through quickly. This is a picture of Harvard Glacier in College Fjord. So there's huge tidewater glaciers in College Fjord. Many of them are named after American Ivy League universities, such as Harvard Glacier and a few other really famous American universities there as well. Great for zodiac cruising and kayaking. We plan to visit Kayak Island as well. So one of the islands that George Bering and William Steller discovered when they first discovered Alaska. So wonderful for kayaking and zodiac cruising there also. So some really interesting history here. And just a quick overview, so I won't go into this in too much detail, but it's really the main differences between the three itineraries. So each of the itineraries does visit, goes through British Columbia's Inside Passage, going through the Johnstone Strait, which has a high number of orca whales that we certainly hope to see as we sail through there. All three itineraries visit Metlakatla Indian community, goes through the wonderful Misty Fjords with the iconic the mountain scenery there, Tracy Arm with the Twin Sawyer glaciers, through Icy Strait and Elfin Cove. But on the Alaska adventure, that one visits Wrangel, Thomas Bed Glacier, Frederick Sound, and all those things listed there. So it's a nice quick snapshot to see the main similarities and differences between those three itineraries. And some of the other nice images there. So the Kodiak brown bear on Kodiak Island is a subspecies of the same bears found, along the southeast of Alaska, but this species has kind of evolved in isolation. So it's actually the largest terrestrial predator in the world, so larger than the other ones found in the other parts of Alaska. The polar bear, of course, is the marine mammal, but the Kodiak brown bear is the largest terrestrial predator in the world. So the wonderful Aleutian mountain range there. So we certainly hope to see a lot of this stunning scenery throughout the itinerary. So that kind of wraps up our kind of cold climate voyages, and excited to be talking about some of the new warmer climate expeditions as well. So we're really excited to be operating in Baja, California for the first time. And we're super excited because we're going to be using the Sylvia Earle, and the Sea of Cortez. Sylvia Earle has been diving in this region for many years. It's a Mission Blue Hope Spot as well. So Mission Blue is an organization chaired by Sylvia Earle to conserve some of the the waterways and the oceans around the world, which have wonderful marine biodiversity. So I think it's great that we're operating the Sylvia Earle in an area that she is so passionate about. So some wonderful scenery in the Sea of Cortez. This is Isla San Francisco, which is really famous for its crescent-shaped bay, and just great for all of our aquatic activities. And you can see the ridge line there right in the middle of the photo. So we do a wonderful walk up the ridge line just to be able to look back and see this fantastic scenery and see some of the coastal deserts landscape as well. And of course, the Sea of Cortez, also known as the Gulf of California, separates Mexican mainland by the Gulf of California. So it's like I said, a designated hope spot chaired by Dr. Sylvia Earle. It's a World Heritage Site, as well as being a hope spot. So in the Sea of Cortez, it's home to some 900 species of fish and sharks, 90 of which are actually endemic. There are 2,000 invertebrates, almost 40% of the world's total species of marine mammals, and 30% of the world's marine cetaceans, such as whales, dolphins, and porpoises are found here. So just some interesting stats just to kind of illustrate the richness in the waterways here. Next slide, please. So just beautiful scenery. This is Isla Espiritu Santo, just to give you, a nice shot of the lovely coastal desert. And of course, the underwater marine biodiversity here as well. So in the Sea of Cortez, there are about 244 different islands and islets, colorful coastal areas that are teeming with diverse wildlife, including fantastic flying mobula rays, as well as these wonderful California sea lions. So there's 700 different species of vascular plant species as well. So not only is it there's great marine biodiversity, but also wonderful biodiversity on land also. And I was talking about before about the mobula rays. So we're there at a time of year where there's a huge migration of these mobula rays, also called flying rays. Twice a year they migrate through the Sea of Cortez it's a mating season for them. And this behavior where they leap out of the water is meant to be, a way of attracting a mate. So both the males and the females display this behavior, leaping out of the water. So it's a wonderful experience for us to be able to catch this if we're lucky. So we have two itineraries in Baja, California. The first one is our long one. It's a 13-day itinerary. Some of the highlights here. So this one visits both the Pacific coast as well as the spending a lot of time in the Sea of Cortez that I was just talking about. So the highlights, of course, are seeing some of the region's exceptional biodiversity, keeping watch for, fingers crossed, we get to see these wonderful migrating mobula rays. Of course, diving and snorkeling and kayaking to experience some of the wonderful underwater marine biodiversity. Some great walks and hikes along the coastal deserts to see some of the great cactus, some of which are more than 25 meters tall. So great for anyone who's interested in coastal desert flora, and also excellent for bird watching as well. So we're looking out for the blue-footed boobies that are almost synonymous with the Galapagos, but they're also found here. Frigate birds and the endemic Xanthus hummingbird. So again, great for anyone who's interested in bird watching as well. So of course, these voyages are great for all of our activities, including snorkeling, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, of course, scuba diving. Next slide. So the first of the longer itineraries, this one heads across to the Pacific coast with its great bird watching opportunities along the mangroves there. So as we're kayaking or walking along, kayaking or zodiac cruising, get to see some of these fantastic species, including the brown pelicans as well. Okay, and then finally, the last of our warm climate expeditions is to Raja Ampat in West Papua. And again, Raja Ampat has a number of Mission Blue Hope spots. So again, it's great that we're able to operate aboard the Sylvia Earle and visiting some more of her Mission Blue Hope spots. So it's a 14-day itinerary, 21st of September to the 4th of October, including starts off with a charter flight from Denpasar in Bali up to Biak, and then we spend the rest of the time exploring some of the wonderful islands and bays there. Great for snorkeling and diving, of course, amongst the world's most biodiverse marine ecosystems at Raja Ampat. We get to swim amongst the whale sharks in Chenderawasih Marine National Park. So there's huge, the largest fish species in the world, so growing anywhere from 5 to 10 meters. We search for the endemic birds of paradise up in the Afak Mountains. So again, wonderful for birders. There's a number of birds of paradise species, and so yeah, be prepared to wake up early to see some of these, hope to see some of these wonderful bird species. And not only do we experience some of the wonderful natural attractions, but some great history as well. We visit the impressive Fort Belgica, so one of the largest remaining European forts in Indonesia on Banda Neira Island. So I'll show you a picture of that a bit later on, but you know, of course, the Spice Islands were where the Dutch and the Portuguese kind of, you know, waged their spice wars back in the 16th century, when nutmeg and mace were highly prized luxurious spices in Europe. So some of the activities we offer on this voyage is snorkeling, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, and scuba diving. as you would expect from this area. So next slide, please. Picture of the whale shark here in Cendrawasih Marine National Park. And just this superb kind of archipelago of, you know, forest-covered karst scenery here, and just that wonderful turquoise water with all the marine biodiversity below. So the two hope spots in the Raja Ampat, we've got the Coral Triangle, as well as the Missoul Marine Reserve. So the Coral Triangle is home to the highest diversity of coral species on Earth, and Missoul Marine Reserve in South Raja Ampat, as well. It's often called the most biodiverse underwater ecosystems anywhere. There's more fish, corals, and mollusks than anywhere in the world. Cendrawasih Bay there, we've got some great pristine beaches, offshore islands, great for water activities and hiking trails and seeing some endemic birds. Like I said, this is up in the Arctic Mountains, the wonderful, magnificent bird of paradise that we hope to see. And this is the Mambarama River, which is a great name, rolls right off the tongue. It's known as the Amazon of West Papua, so you can see it's snaking through the forest there. And we spend some time zodiac cruising around the mouth of the Mambarama River and meeting some of the local people there. So we could walk through the rainforest, do some kayaking, zodiac cruising in this very remote part of Papua. And this is Fort Belgica. That I was talking about before. So you can see the lovely fort there, one of the best preserved 16th century forts overlooking Gunung Api. And there's a wonderful kind of lava flow at the base of Gunung Api. So after we explore Fort Belgica, walk along the waterfront there and learn about the history of you know, the spice trading back in the 16th century. Then in the afternoon, we do some of our water activities over the lava flows at the base of Gunung Api. So we do some diving and snorkeling and some paddling around there before our ship continues to Darwin, where we disembark. So that's it with the new itineraries. I hope that gets you excited about some of the new places that we're going to. And I'll just quickly talk about, you know, some of our classic Arctic itineraries that we're still operating as well. So the next slide, please. So we've still got our classic Svalbard Odyssey itineraries, 12-day itineraries aboard the Greg Mortimer. So these are the ones that we've run for many years. So we've got the Svalbard Odyssey, 3 itineraries, 3 departures there in 2022. We've got an Arctic Complete, which is a combination of our Svalbard Odyssey and our Jewels of the Arctic, which concentrates mostly on East Greenland. So it has a couple of days in Svalbard before heading across to East Greenland. So the Arctic Complete is a combination of both. And the Iceland circumnavigation is operating in 2022 as well. So a wonderful circumnavigation of Iceland, which was very popular for us when we launched it back last year. And also a brand new itinerary on the Greg Mortimer called the Greenland Odyssey. We're the only operator to be offering this voyage. It's quite comprehensive. Starting, we embark in Reykjavik in Iceland before heading across to West Greenland. To East Greenland, I'm sorry, up to Kangerlussuaq Fjord. That fjord up there is quite famous because it has the Skarsgård intrusion, which is well known to geologists around the world. It's, of course, been around formed about 55 million years ago. So for anyone who's interested in geology, this is a great opportunity to visit the Skarsgård intrusion. Then we head down and visit the Sørmelek Fjord, which is the second largest in Greenland, before heading down to South Greenland and sailing through the wonderful Prince Christian Sound, which is surrounded by towering mountains, great for climbing, with some wonderful glaciers there, carving directly into the sea, before making our way through some of the small settlements. There's an interesting Viking history in Valsey down south, and then we kind of head up the west coast, which is more inhabited, visiting Nuuk, the capital there, and visiting like the Ilulissat ice fjord that I talked about earlier on, which is included on the Northwest Passage voyages. It's a wonderful way to finish the itineraries. It's a nice complete Voyage of Greenland. So the two activities we're going to be offering there are sea kayaking and of course rock climbing. Next slide, please. So that's it from me, and I'll pass back over to Anna to talk a bit more about a wonderful new vessel, the Sylvia Earle. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Mark. Wow, that was awesome. I hope that's given everybody a small slice of escapism. I have to say, I think this is the most comprehensive expedition program I've ever seen in the industry. And I think the only difficult thing for you is just going to be deciding which wonderful adventure to take next. So many of you are aware that we are currently building a new expedition vessel to join this, the Greg Mortimer. And you might be wondering how we're progressing with the brand new ship. So the Sylvia Earle is on track. And sorry, there we go. So I'm pleased to announce that, yes, the Sylvia Earle is on track for launch in October next year, in plenty of time for the Antarctic 21-22 season. So it's my great pleasure to give you a sneak peek here of the new renderings of the vessel. I hope you like the new colour scheme of the ship. I think she's going to look quite spectacular out in the wilderness. So these are some of the interior renderings of the ship. So of interest on this slide, in the top right-hand corner, you can see our new science centre. So this is located right in the bow of the ship, and our expeditioners will get the opportunity to join our expedition guides in here and get a deeper understanding of the environments that we are exploring. So by joining in with our citizen science research programs on board, expeditioners get to give a little something back to the world, which will help with the future preservation and protection of these pristine and fragile environments. On the next slide, you can see some images of our dining room and bar areas. Just like the Greg Mortimer, it's very relaxed, spacious and airy, and there are lots of picture windows everywhere. So one thing that Greg was very passionate about in designing the original ship was that you could see the ocean from pretty much everywhere that you were on the ship. So you'll see picture windows everywhere, even in the sauna at that bottom right picture there. And in the top left, you can see one of our typical balcony cabins. So the decor is deliberately very calming, soft and neutral. We don't want anything to detract from the stunning environments that we're in. Also, on the bottom left, you can see a nice new feature that is going to be featured on this ship, which is unique to the Sylvia Earle. It's our heated infinity swimming pool. So the pool is going to be kept warm by the residual engine heat of the ship, which is very much in keeping with our commitment to responsible travel. And you can also see there are sunbeds there as well, so I'm sure they'll be getting quite the workout in our warmer destinations. We also have some great news to share with you today, which I have no doubt will give you the extra support and confidence that you'll need to plan your future expeditions during the current economic and, well, just the global climate, I guess. So we're offering even more flexibility for new bookings. So with our book with confidence policy, if within 30 days of your voyage departure, certain conditions apply. So for example, if your home country does not allow or recommend international travel, or if no travel insurance is available that would include cover for coronavirus, or if you're required to quarantine at your voyage destination or en route at a stopover point, you will be eligible to receive a full refund or a future travel credit for your voyage. There is a link there to our website where you can see the full terms and conditions of this offer. So please feel free to check that out. Another thing that we've introduced is for any new reservations going forward, all deposits for new bookings will now automatically be placed into a separate trust fund. Some people know this as an escrow account, which means that your deposit is safe and 100% protected when you book with us. So I hope this support will give you the extra confidence and peace of mind to be booking our voyages at the moment. We also have developed quite an extensive health and safety protocol in light of the current global situation. So obviously the health and safety of our guests, crew and expedition team is of the utmost importance to us at Aurora Expeditions. So you can see on this slide where you can find all the latest health and safety protocol measures that we've put in place to ensure everyone's safety. I won't go into great detail here, but please have a look at the Travel with Confidence section on our website, which you can easily find at the top of the homepage, or follow the link here. This will have the very latest update, and the information's all laid out nice and clearly step by step. But I must point out that these measures are continually being revised in line with the latest medical advice and global updates. So please, if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us at any time. And so something else that I'm sure you're all excited about, we have obviously launched our incredible Arctic and global itineraries, as Mark went through with you in quite lovely detail. And as a special launch offer, early bookers are currently able to access a discount of up to 20% off the new season, and these savings are also combinable with our loyalty discounts for our repeat guests as well. Now at Aurora, we really value our early bookers, and we always offer the best pricing at the launch for our passengers. So as many of you are aware, we're not a company that slashes our prices at the last minute. So you can book now in full confidence that you'll get the best market offers and best cabin choices. And you can be confident that your neighbour, colleague or your kids' teacher is not going to be offered a last minute deal better than what you've already received. So if you are interested in any of the lovely voyages that Mark has introduced to you, I would highly recommend that you talk to us right away. As remember, we're not like the big cruise lines. Our group sizes are very small, so these trips do sell out well ahead of departure. And we have been inundated with inquiries from across the globe. In fact, we've already sold over 300 berths for these Arctic and global voyages since they were released just over 2 weeks ago. With everything going on in the world at the moment, I think getting well and truly off the grid in our small group style and having a big trip to look forward to appeals now more than ever before. We've covered so much ground today, and I hope you found this session to be informative, and I hope it's given you some real inspiration as well. If you would like more information, please reach out to your preferred travel professional, or feel free to contact our wonderful reservations team on the relevant number that you see on your screen at the moment. You can also find all of our contact details on our website, and you can contact us by the website as well. So now I can see that we have received some questions throughout the presentation today. So thank you for sending those through. It's not too late. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask, just pop it in that question box now, and I'll hand over to Martha for a short question and answer session now.
Hi everyone. I know that some of you have submitted some questions beforehand and during this webinar, so I'll try to get through as many as possible, but not to worry if we don't get to respond to your question in particular. During the webinar, everyone will be emailed the answers to their questions individually after the session is over. So to start with, our first question, we actually had quite a lot on the Russian Far East and the Northwest Passage. So I think I'll try and ask a lot of these together, Mark, if that's okay. The first one was from Janet, and she wanted to ask what was the likelihood of seeing the Northern Lights on the Northwest Passage voyage?
That's a good question. We certainly get asked that quite a lot. We are in the region at the right time of year to see the Northern Lights. So there's a very, very high chance. Certainly can never guarantee that we're going to see them, but across all of our voyages, if any, I think you're most likely to see the Northern Lights on the Northwest Passage voyages. So there's a very, very good chance that you'll see them, but you never know with Mother Nature, do you? So fingers crossed.
And then also Mary had a question about the Northwest Passage trip as well, whether there's quite a lot of walking involved in the trip, or what should the landings look like, the day-to-day landings?
That's a good question too. The level of activity is quite similar on the Northwest Passage to our other Arctic itineraries as well. So there's a combination of, the Zodiac cruising and hiking. So on each day, there will be opportunities to walk, but it's certainly not so difficult that, anyone of a reasonable fitness won't be able to participate. So no more than 2 hours of walking across. It's rocky terrain in many places, so just be prepared for some uneven footing, but it's certainly not so challenging that most people can't do it.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And then a question for you, Anna. Quite a few people asked this. This is a question from Chris, Stuart, Maggie, and Ludwig. They all had questions on the solo supplement, what offerings we give to passengers that are traveling by themselves.
Yeah, we certainly do. We love solo travellers. So if a passenger is willing to share with another passenger of the same gender, they can actually opt to share, and they will pay no single supplement. Now, even if we are unable to find somebody to share them with, so they do end up having their own cabin in that case, and they will not have to pay the single supplement. However, if they would like to guarantee the sole use of the cabin, then there is a very modest 50% surcharge that we charge, which I think is very generous compared to some of the offerings out there.
Okay, thanks, Anna. And then a question from Nana. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Nana. Do the excursions go out in the early morning for the light for photographers, or do you have to go out after breakfast? Or what time do the excursions go out?
That's a good question too. So it's really, being an expedition, it's really up to the expedition leader. I mean, if there's something exciting that happens, sometimes if there's whale activities that are happening quite early in the morning or something, then make an announcement from the expedition leader. There's something really exciting to wake up and experience before breakfast. So occasionally you may be like a pre-breakfast an outing if there's something interesting, but usually it's breakfast first and then out for either a Zodiac cruise or a walk. But yeah, so those activities are interchangeable, whether it's a hike in the morning or a Zodiac cruise in the morning. Hard to say, but sometimes you can get a very early one. So I think for photographers, I mean, if there is a photography group, for example, then if the light is particularly good at that time in the morning, then they may go out really early to get their shots. So it really does depend on the day and what's happening with the weather as well.
I think it's also probably worth noting as well that sometimes we nearly have 24 hours daylight. So there is no first light. In some places in the Arctic, it's nearly light the entire time. And then another question from John: how often do you get off the ship daily, or how often are excursions, I guess?
Yeah, so I think we were saying we do aim for at least 2 per day, and yeah, like you said, if it's if it's 24 hours of daylight and after dinner, there's again something interesting, then often the expedition leader will say, hey, let's jump on the Zodiacs and go for a nice cruise after dinner, whether it's 9:30 or whatever time it is. So we do aim for 2, but sometimes it's more than that.
I think we just have time for maybe one other question, I think. So we had 2 people actually ask about our kayaking program, from Catherine and Janet. And Catherine asked, would like to know more about the kayaking expeditions, please, and what do the kayakers do when they go out on their excursions?
Okay, so I think just generally, so when you kind of pre-book your kayaking, when the other people are out hiking or Zodiac cruising, then the kayakers will generally tend to want to explore by kayak, and so the kayakers will go kayaking twice a day if they choose to, or they may want to do a hike on one particular occasion and kayak on another one of their excursions. So usually with kayaking, you do need to have some level of experience, because we don't really kayak in open seas. When we do kayak, it's usually within a bay, or in some kind of waterway that it's calm, but you do need to have some a little bit of pre-experience. You don't want to be, getting into these kayaks for the very first time when you're in these remote places. Sometimes the distances can be quite far, especially in the Antarctic. Some of the outings can be quite long, so it's more to do with fitness than it is to do with difficulty. But the hiking excursions can be anywhere from an hour and a half. We may have different levels of experience amongst our kayakers, so you may have like a less experienced group going out with one guide and a more experienced group going with another guide. So we do look at people's booking forms and see where their experience is at and match them with other similar levels of fitness and experiences that you get a better experience with the people that you're going out with. So if you're interested in kayaking, definitely speak to our consultants and they'll give you more information. But yeah, it's important to be fit enough and be prepared for some of these activities. It's cold and windy too, so it's not just paddling on a nice summer day, because it's cold and windy, so you've got to deal with the weather conditions as well.
And I guess a few people had questions about how they find out what trips have kayaking on them. And if you go onto our website, you'll see it listed either on the voyage that you're looking at, what activities are on it, or you can go to our search function and look for voyages that have kayaking or diving expeditions as well. So I think that's about all questions that we have time for today. But as I said, if you've asked a question either through when you're registering for this webinar or the one that was that we were hosting yesterday, or while we're having the webinar today, we'll get a response within the next day or so to your question via the email that you registered with. You'll also get a copy of the webinar that'll be sent to you shortly. So if you missed any of the beginning of it, or you want to watch it back, or you weren't able to join today, you'll get a copy of it. So I'm just going to pass you back to Steve, and thanks very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Martha. Thanks for keeping that together. Mark, you really made me want to go to the Russian Far East again.
Hey.
It's such a beautiful place. And I mean, let's face it, Anna, you have some beautiful renderings of the Sylvia Earle, and that's definitely the way to go to see some of these really unique places. The spontaneity of an expedition allows us, as we just discussed, for about 24 hours a day, we can actually be getting in Zodiac. So I think for those of you who haven't traveled yet on an expedition, or haven't traveled with us in an expedition, I think a whole big new world is waiting out there for you. We're certainly going to some of the most beautiful places on Earth. And on behalf of everyone at Aurora Expeditions, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on board in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.